trying to do. They were trying to take allegory out of the thing. And I am very rudely putting it square in the middle of it. Okay, you can see how old the slide is by the dust on there. Next. There you have the Choosing My Parents, and then there's Fate, 1951, and 2025. And back in 1973, that was not a big deal. But now I'm getting close. It's like only 12 years away, something like that. Getting close, 13 years away. And then Fate meets Death at my death, and they decide if I should go up to heaven or down to hell. And then I must have done, I've been, over the years, hundreds of drawings like this, similar. Can we turn off the sound? Is that possible? Please, next, please. Feather from an angel's wing. And of course, the angel's up there somewhere. Next. This is the soul being stretched between a demon and an angel. So you have the object here and the subject here, and the extension of the two. They become extensions of the person in the middle, or the soul. Which is odd, because it's not the body of the person, it's the person themselves. I mean, the personality of the person, when you start thinking about what a ghost is. Next. And that's the background of a comic. This is a guy who was not important at all. He had no speaking lines. He didn't say a word. And I was just talking about his eventual death. Next. This is the cadaver. Now you can see that the cadaver is resting on a plank of wood. And so he has a pillow. There's no reason for the cadaver to have a pillow. But they put a pillow there for him to have. And you can see the back of the skull is here at the bottom. And I simply dealt with the eyes, the nose, the mouth, the ears. Next. Oh brother, what a nuisance. Now the old crazy old gaffer's gone and died on me. So this is a dead cartoon character. He's even feeling his pulse. So there's pulse, that means there's blood, and there was a heart in there, and he has a heart, but he's alive. So I was interested in the difference between these two. One is alive and one is dead. Next. This is a headache. This is from the, again, early 70s. And it's made of plasticine, and I just took the picture and he disappeared. Next. This is a stuffed figure that I made, oh gosh, mid-70s. I made three. I made a head and body, a complete person, and just a body. And I slept with them all. And for as long as I could. And they got pretty gross, and I never really was into it. But this whole issue of going into the person was important enough. Next. This was from the show at Hall Walls, and I bought this sign in a stationery store and simply put it up, made a plastic thing for it. So there's no painting involved, I just put the sign on a piece of paper. Next. Now this is a sign broken up. And so the head is red, the body is yellow, blue, and green. Next. Here you have a face broken up, the eyes, the ears, the nose, and the mouth, and then a head and body here, and a head and body here. And there's a body with, that's blue and green behind it. But this is really the minimalist kind of figure. And over here, I had two red dots. There, I had two orange dots over here. I had a violet dot down here and a green dot there. So that becomes the meaning of what's all going on over here. Next. This is the head and body, which is a newspaper. And next. And that's the back. So the back is really the sign. So I was interested in how one picture defines another. I was told when I was in school that behind all our thoughts are words, that we think in words, that words are paramount, that if you break it down, it goes to a word. And I never believed it. I think I'm dyslexic. Both my kids are dyslexic, so I think I'm probably dyslexic. And this is why I have this issue with signs all the time. But I was interested in how the semiotics are functioning with meaning. And there's this woman in the US that says that she thinks in pictures. That when she thinks in pictures. She does not think in words. She talks in words, but she does not think in words. Now, I know that I do not think in words. That would take way too long. And I don't think, I'm pretty certain that I don't think in pictures either. I don't think pictures, thought is not from pictures nor words. It is something more abstract and something much quicker. I think it's contextual, and I think it has more to do with music than it does with words. I think that's just my own theory about it. But this is leading into all that stuff. That's something I've been talking about in the last 5-6 years. But this really anticipates all of that. This is, as I said, in the mid-70s. Next. This is the first show. This was at Hall Walls. And so you have, I put up my photographs, so it's the doll, the dead man, there's pinching the dead man's arm, there's the complete cadaver, there's a Thanksgiving dinner, a piano, just a variety of performances and things like this, movie set. And it's all, I had all these photographs, and I didn't want to put them up in a row. I didn't want to put them up in the grid. I wanted to put them up in a field like this, similar to how an artist or a child or a student puts up pictures, or a scientist or anybody puts up pictures around their desk. They are put up simply to reflect on him, and so he can understand or she can understand what they're after. And so this kind of is representing it. It kind of plays into the bulletin board and what's posted when you're posting images. Now the drawings themselves are much more in a grid, where you have, there's the choosing my parents, there's the entrance to hell drawing that I went into at Artispace, that's death, that's a detail of an angel's wing. So all the subject here is very much about the cosmology. And then over here, it's all about physical law. So I have about gravity and light and heat and cold and molecules and all of that, that's here. Next, please, next. And then that leads to the signs, and these are Blissy symbols. Charles Bliss invented these, and these are the signs. And then the signs are used in jewelry, and then patches, and then I have a t-shirt, flags, armbands, things like this. Next. I'm going to speed up now. Here the things breaks down. Now, here is the body. You see here. Without that, you wouldn't know what these are. But this tells you what that is, and it tells you what that is, and it tells you what that is. And you never use the word body, you never use the word leg, you never use, but it does for you. And here's the head and body, and here is heaven, sky, ground, and hell. That's salt stars, that's a soul stretched between a demon and an angel. And then you'll have the meaning for all of these, or a lot of signs. Here's an album cover and a wine kind of container for grapes, French wine. And so when Douglas Crimp, he saw my installation, he said it reminded him of a dormitory room. That someone in a dormitory room, they would put up their work like this. And I didn't think it was, I thought that was a compliment, because it's really a matter of when a child goes to school, they bring their life with them. And in that sense, the art becomes a mirror of not just not just them, but of their world. They are their world, and the art represents that. And I consider the first art to be the art of the collector. That's the first art, that when you collect things. And people don't consider it an art at all, but so many people do it, and they spend so much time doing it, collecting stamps, coins, matchbooks. Anything you can come up with, you collect, and you get involved in it, and it represents an interest for you. And in a way, I'm playing off of that a little bit with this. Next, please. That's the heaven and hell with the sign, and that sign will be on a sheet of paper over here with a representation of that. Next. Jewelry. Next. A later bulletin board, more formalized, but still doing the same thing. It makes information, it makes personal information impersonal and personal information personal. That means I can have, this would be something that I just found, you know, the day I was there, or it could be that this is my best friend and myself talking about art. Next. It's a detail with the cadaver. You can see the surface of the skin and the nose. I mean, it really was powerful. Next. That's that chart that I talked about of the media. Next. And here you have the signs and their different colors. Next. And I put my name on top. No, let's go back. Can we go back? I want to show you something that's interesting for me. Oh dear. Now you see the head and the language. So you have the subject and the object. And I had like a vocabulary on top. And this is really before computers. It really, and people, when they saw this, they were thinking what people would talk about. They would talk about airports, of course, but then they would talk about China, and they would talk about Central America, and they would talk about Egypt. So I would be in an exhibition, and someone would go on and on about Egypt and about, you know, all these different cultures. But it really was the time. This was like the late 70s when basically the beginnings of the information age were really getting going. Late 70s, early 80s. And so what's happening here is really a representation of that. And the colors all have meaning. Next. And then the flag, I mean the posters, I have my name on it, and then the subject of elements, fate, sign, God, world. This is from Geneva and an exhibition at the Centre d'Art Contemporain. Next. First show in a gallery, and I had flags and posters, and I even shrunk wrapped the posters to look like, these are paintings, but they're made to look like posters. And I had a head and body, and I had charts, and I had photographs, and I had drawings, and I had bulletin boards, and people thought it was a group show. Really, when they walked in, people assumed that it was a group show. They didn't really see it as being a body of work. And I felt that the show was like, it could have been in a mall, and if I was there to talk about what was going on. Next. Again, more posters. Next. Mullican life. Next. Mullican death. Death is on the right side, life's on the left side. That's it. Next. Again, the subject above, the elements below. So this is not unlike the piece that's outside, the big yellow thing. This is from the 1981, 82. Yeah, next. Here the cosmology, and then the house, and then the elements, and then the city. Next. Another one with the same thing. I have this, that's the Big Bang. There's dinosaurs, and then there's a Greek temple, and then Manhattan. And then you have this 19th century kind of weird cosmology up here. And then the country, the nature on the left and city on the right. And then the skeleton coming down, and then that's the bathroom, the bedroom, the kitchen and the living room. So the kitchen and the bathroom are on the left side with nature, and the consciousness rooms is over here on the right. So everything is oriented. Next. This is this is a flag based on the 5 colors. Can someone have some keys they can loan me for this? I'm going to demonstrate something. Someone in the front row. Someone has keys. Keys. Does anybody have keys? Throw them to me. Okay, good. See, quick. Very fast. No, turn it down. It's okay. Okay, so these keys. So the green area is, that's the material. So that's material without meaning. And that's at the bottom. And that is and you say I have an atomic frying pan. And I throw these keys over the pan, and the plastic even starts to melt. It's so hot. And then the soft metal turns. There's a lot of this rubber here, that would be gone in the first millisecond. And immediately what happens is that the keys twist. So they're no longer working keys. They still look like keys, but they're no functioning keys anymore. And then eventually what happens that within maybe 10 seconds, the soft metal melts and the harder metal is still barely there, and then the whole thing, within a minute, it's like molten goop, and then within 2 minutes it's almost gone, it's disappeared. And that's at the bottom. That would be in the bottom of the chart out front too, where you have those dots. This is the bottom. That's the green. That's the world. That's the elemental world. And then above that, you have the blue area, and that's the world unframed. And that's these keys 10 minutes ago in that girl's bag or pocket or wherever these keys were. But you can imagine those keys where they were in her bag, and you can kind of, and that's the world that's in the blue area. That's the world unframed. So that's when the keys are in their natural place, where there are keys. And then you go to the yellow, which is where things change. And that's where the key is taken out of her purse, and it's on display for you to look at. And here you can see it. These are her keys. Only two keys. That's surprising. And so that would be in the middle of the yellow. Now I can say that, well, difficult in this instance, I always say this, but that these were Elvis Presley's keys. And Elvis, these were his personal keys to Graceland. And they were just recently found. And he was maniacal. He would, in the middle of the night, he would make sure the doors were locked. He was very concerned about that, people breaking in. And he was a bit of an obsessive character, so he would actually make sure the doors were locked in the house. And they are at auction. They're coming up at auction. They no longer work. All the locks have been changed, so there's no practical use to these keys anymore. And they're going to be at auction, and they're expected to bring around $300,000. And Graceland is the big bidder. They're going to get those keys back, and they're going to be on display. And that would be in the yellow. And the yellow is there. And then you go to all the brochures, all the photographs, the keys themselves are all in the black and the white, the black area, which is language. So the keys are no longer working, not even visualizing. They don't have to be real anymore. They become emblematic and they've become graphic. People want to see them, but they know what they look like before they even look at them, because they've seen the photos of them. Then you go to the top, and the top is the subject. And the fact that I have to ask someone from the audience for keys is because I hate keys. I put them, when I travel, I put them in my bag, and my bag is in my hotel. So I don't have my keys with me, except for when I go back. Because I hate keys. I hate this idea that I have to lock things. And I hate keys on my telephone. I hate pins. I keep forgetting. I get my bank pin and my phone pin mixed up all the time. And I get in trouble for that. I was mugged outside of my house in Soho, New York, because I was trying to get my keys. And they got me. And Robert Longo, a friend of mine, back in the 70s and 80s, he had a car in New York, and he never locked it. In fact, he had the doors, the windows were it was all wide open, because he was tired of people breaking in. And then no one could break in. No one stole the car. It was a piece of junk. And he had to, it was like utopia or something, that he was living without keys. He had to start the car, but he didn't have to worry about locking the doors. And so I hate keys. Now, my hatred of keys is not attached to any singular key. It's all keys. And that's up here. And that's the meaning of all keys to me, which is awful. That's the subject. That's the subject. And then the physicality is here. And then you have this relationship between the two. And this became a model. All my work is, when you see it in green, and you see it out there, it's in yellow, that's really the world frame. That's when the things change. So whose keys are these? Next. And there it is. So you have the cosmology above and the world below. I thought that I would come up with a city based on that chart. Next. And this is a carpet at the Hirshhorn Museum based on that, on a chart very similar. Next. I did a stained glass. Next. I did a lot of stained glasses. This was done in Vienna. And then a city plan where you actually have walls and roads that are mining. And this looks like a game field. When people see my work, they say, look, basketball court, any kind of video game, but it really refers to the game mentality. And I put that into this glass, which is very, very different. So you have this tension between the two. But the red is always subject and the green is always object. Next. This is done in the Gamenta Museum. There, it's on permanent, it's there permanently. Next. This was a sculpture project, Munster sculpture project, and this was isotopic chemistry. This was the library, and this was inorganic and organic chemistry. So it refers to the buildings around it. And I am about so tall. So I gave lectures on this piece, walking around the whole thing. Next. That's another one where you can have everything as a kind of an order, from the generator to the evolution to the cosmology. Next. This is bath stone. This is made with the same material as this. Next. This was in Tourcoing, in the ceiling, where I take out all, this was, I uncovered this structure and then put the signs up. Next. These flags, this is the magasin, and each one of these flags can go into a suitcase. They're very thin, and I carried a couple with me from New York. They weren't all shipped ahead. But the signs themselves and the architecture is becoming, you know, this is 1990s, so it's actually happening more and more. And I'm just addressing the height of this is where they built the Eiffel Tower. And I felt like I really wanted to just define that space. Next. This is at the Alexanderplatz train station in Berlin in the early 90s. These flags were produced for a Museum of Contemporary Art. That's the soul being stretched between the demon and the angel. That's faith. So these are all cosmological signs. And there was never any published thought having to do with the fascist colors. I mean, they are the fascist colors, and they were there, but they didn't. This was not. It was never. It never came up while the piece was up there. Next. Earlier rubbing. This was in Tourcoing. Next. This is a steamship. You see third class. This is a 1919 steamship. Third class that's all those bunk beds, like 30 in a room. Then second class, you have your own bunk bed, but you also have your own room area. And then first class, you have your own bed and your own bathroom here. And then you have staterooms, and then you have the restaurant, and then on the very top is a gallery. And then the stained glass. Now, I didn't invent, this was 1919 Italian steamship. So the people here are only one step above solids and liquids. So, and in fact, the body is considered basically taking up space. And then here, the body becomes sublime. It becomes more celestial, more godlike. So you have these two ways of looking at the human. One is an endless kind of representation of the world that will ever grow, and then the other is simply a finite thing that will die. And I use this in my work as a representation of class, really, class structure. Next. Dallas project, where you have the elements, and then this is 16 feet high. So this is, I think this is about the same size. This is quite a large, big, that's the Paris Opera House and the arts. Next. That's the city, where you have the red area subjective, and then language, and the world frame, world unframing elements. History here. Next. City again. This is in Manchester at Corner House. Next. again, and you have the cosmology, you have the signs above. And I showed this in Los Angeles, and then a company saw it there and said, would you like to go walking down these streets? This was in 1986. And they said, would you like to go walking down? It was a place called Digital Productions, wanted to work with me as an artist. And it was an opportunity, like, was just amazing to me because of my stick figures and entering the picture and all of that stuff. And they said, they just came to me and said, would you like to enter the picture? And so then next, this was the first thing they did. They did it very quickly, and there are no scan lines. This was done with the Cray supercomputer. And the information goes so fast through that thing, you need a big building to keep it cold so it doesn't get too hot. And they just did this very quickly for me, but it was the beginning. Then next, and then here you have about a 19-foot, and it's a whole city, as I had earlier, and you could go, there's an animation of going throughout it in different parts. I have animation going into it. And eventually, I designed it as a virtual environment. In 1991, I produced this city as a virtual place where you went into it with VPL equipment. But this is done in the 80s. It's very early for this kind of thing. These are all, these are all inkjet. They're not inkjet. There's nothing else. Next. That's inside one of those buildings. If you see here, this is inside. You look outside. There's these buildings. Why don't you go back a slide? Go back one, and I'll show you where this picture is taken. These are all the buildings in here. You can't see them. They're so small. But I think it's the building right there is where that picture was taken. And I would go in to the picture, inside the data, with the programmer, and we would take pictures ourselves. Now, Carl Sims was designing, this was done on a Connections Machine 2 from Thinking Machines. This was a supercomputer, and it cost a ton of money. And they created the database to go into it. There was a programmer who was two weeks ahead of us, always, as we were going. So he was designing the shadows, he was designing the various elements of how to build this place as we went along. So there was no programming. And the thing cost $1 zillion. It was so expensive. The phone company, this was to show at the Museum of Modern Art, and the phone company flipped the bill. And we had to do all of this stuff with the museum to make sure that the phone company got credit. NYMEX got credit. And what the museum wanted to know was who took the picture. So go ahead. Go one. So who took this picture? They wanted to know. They needed to give, they've always, up to that point, have given photo credit. I said, there is no photographer. It doesn't exist. No, really. We know there's no photographer. But who took the picture? And they did not understand how that worked. And because I took the picture inside the data with Jerry, who was the guy who built the whole thing with me. Next. And that's a prison, a hospital, and a shelter, and a cemetery. Now this is the elements part. This is the part of the building where the keys really melt quickly. Next. These rocks were produced very simply as rocks. Next. And then these were done with a technique called lithography, where I made those rocks real. It was like reaching into the picture and pulling out the real rock. And that's what these are. It's probably one of the first artworks to use that medium. This was again in the like 89, 90. Next. And this is where you have a plotter drawing, a video, a big poster, two of these, there's the rocks, and then the light boxes. And everyone thought it was all about the video. But this defined the database, this defined the database, they all define the database, which is in the middle. It's implied. And that's what I was interested in, is how the mind of the machine is represented by the medium which defines it. Next. And this is the virtual. So it's much more minimal because you have to be aware of the polygons. That's a TV, very simple. Next. This is in the world framed pavilion of the virtual environment. Next. Then I did the MIT, which is coming after all the computer stuff. So I'm organizing the material with these walls, these low walls. Next. Again, next. Bulletin boards and these low walls. Next. This is the material that would be in the MIT when it's not on the MIT. This is the Kroller-Müller. Next. And this is the two in the big room of the Kroller-Müller. This is a map with channels and walls that weighs 150 tons. And a map is a weightless thing. A map doesn't need to have any weight whatsoever. In fact, it doesn't. On your iPhone, it has no weight whatsoever. But I wanted to make a map that was so heavy and physical that it becomes something else. Next. This is Documenta. Next. You see the whole thing, and when you go inside, it becomes abstract. Next. This is a Barbara Gladstone, where I built those walls up. Next. And this is the flowers in Antwerp. Next. This is the World's Fair site, history of World's Fair, because my city has more to do with the World's Fair than it does an actual city. Next. And this is again those 5 colors. And here you see them there and there. This is in Zug, Switzerland. And it's 10 meters high. Next. Next. And then I put them on glass. I drew the signs on glass. Next. So when I have a flat, this is a flat chart. That's the city map. And when you put it on a ball, everything connects up. There's no top, there's no bottom. That's the cosmology. So it changes everything when you do it. This is on blown glass. Next. And this is in the city of Bath, England, for an exhibition I did there. And that's the last slide. So what I did quickly, this is going on a long way, but sorry. But the thing is that starting in the 70s, I was working with hypnosis and trance. And the first performance I did in a trance with the hypnosis was where I hired a hypnotist and 3 actors to act out a fictional person's life from birth to death with details. And some were very powerful, like birth was very powerful, death was powerful, but shopping would be another one, swimming would be another one. And I played the father, I played the brother, I played the husband. I was always the other person for these actors. I was not hypnotized myself. But the audience was so disturbed by what was going on that they accused me of being Orwellian and trying to manipulate, like in 1984, these people's brains to believe that they were doing something that they were not. And I decided at that point that I would only have myself hypnotized and not have others hypnotized to do it. Because I didn't want to be accused of being a control freak and getting into this weird gladiator psyche games, which is what that looked like. So let's go to the video. I did performances in the 70s. I stopped in the early 80s, and I started again after virtual reality. After virtual reality, I started to do this again. And then halfway through the virtual, halfway through doing these performances in the 90s and in the 2000s, what happens is that there seems to be a pattern of behavior that is emerging. And that pattern seems to be having to do, why are we in the middle? It doesn't matter. Let's turn down the lights, please. Thank you. And And the interesting thing here is that you see the